In the 5th grade, my teacher at the time had introduced me to a new book that had come out recently. I was an avid reader at the time, so when my teacher introduced me to this book with her stamp of approval on it, jumping into a new series seemed like an incredibly exciting start of an adventure. That book was, of course, Harry Potter.
You're a wizard, Harry.
I was having a talk with a few friends about this the other day, and perhaps it's because we're now adults, now with different perspectives on life, but the first thing that came to mind is how unexpectedly dangerous the wizarding world is, yet contains some of the most overpowered potions and abilities as well. The number of hazardous material and exposure to life-ending incidents, especially to small children at Hogwarts with questionable healthcare resources, would make me think that I'd probably survive less than a month if I was enrolled here. But really, how dangerous could it be?
You're doomed.
Apparently it seems rather easy to let a whole troll wander in unperceived by anyone else, despite the headmaster usually seeming to know everything that goes on in and around the ground at all times. There's also the issue with the school being used as a hiding place for one of the things that the most powerful dark wizard in the history of ever wants to have most of all. Then there's the Forbidden Forest right beside a children's school, being used as punishment for detention, which at the time of the first book were healing grounds for the main antagonist of the entire series.
Yes, you're not dangerous at all, are you? You great ugly brute.
No.
But despite the dangers of the school, there are some pretty amazing, or dare I say magical, safety precautions put in place to mitigate potential dangers. In the Chamber of Secrets, during a Quidditch match against Slytherin, Harry sustains an arm injury from a rogue bludger while attempting to chase down the golden snitch on his broom. His team ends up winning the match, and Hermione is able to dispose of the bludger quickly, but unfortunately for Harry, it was Gilderoy Lockhart that was first on the scene to address the blunt force trauma.
Not to worry, Harry. I will fix that arm of yours straight away.
Not you.
Now, if you weren't aware, Lockhart is a bit of an airhead with too much confidence, so instead of escorting him to the hospital wing or using appropriate magic to brace the arm, he decides to remove all of the bones in Harry's forearm as a means of treating the injury. Madame Pomfrey, who runs the hospital wing at Hogwarts, gives Harry a solution known as Skelligrow, which not only can fix broken bones, but can regrow them entirely, as Lockhart had removed them completely a few moments ago. So at the time of injury, post-Quidditch match and Lockhart shenanigans, Harry has no ulna and no radius, and this Skelligrow is able to spontaneously sprout new bones into his arm. Yes, the process to regrow bones was, quote, a nasty business, but think of how insane of a feat this is when compared to normal bone growth. When Harry's arm bones grow in length, they undergo a process called interstitial lengthening at the epiphyseal plate. The epiphyseal plate is further broken down into 4 distinct smaller zones, but the important part is known as the zone of proliferating cartilage, which is where the lengthening actually starts. This particular zone is filled with cells known as chondrocytes, which are responsible for cartilage formation. As these chondrocytes multiply, or undergo mitotic proliferation, the cartilage is pushed outwards, moving the epiphysis away from the diaphysis, which is the shaft portion of the bone. As more and more chondrocytes are produced, the older ones eventually get pushed into an adjacent zone called the zone of hypertrophic cartilage as they mature and become larger. Unfortunately, the fate of these poor cells is that around this time, they begin a calcification process and die as they now become calcified chondrocytes. A cleanup crew of cells called osteoclasts breaks down these newly dead cells, paving the way for bone-building osteoblasts to lay down new bony matrices. In males, the ulna grows approximately 1.1 centimeters, and the radius approximately 1 centimeter every year from the age of 7 to skeletal maturity. A radius is approximately 10 inches long, or 25.4 centimeters in length, and with an average growth of 1.1 centimeters of bone growth until maturity, we can expect it to take about 23 years for it to reach full length in the forearm.
How long is this going to take?
That means that in one night, Skelligrow can reanimate and regrow bones at over 75,000 times the rate of normal bone growth. So, despite the seemingly overpowered magical nature of potions, healing, and numerous ways to prevent injury, there are also examples in which danger can manifest into serious incidents in a matter of seconds. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, There's a scene towards the end of the movie where Dobby sustains a serious knife wound when Bellatrix throws a knife towards him as he attempts to apparate everyone to safety. Penetrating trauma is particularly tricky to handle because of how quickly things can unfold. The abdomen is the most commonly injured area from a stab wound, so interventions that may be needed would depend on the severity of the injury, including airway, intravenous access, and control of hemorrhage, which is the escape of blood from ruptured vessels. The size and length of the blade, as well as the trajectory, would also need to be considered to determine the best course of action, as knowing this would help address which organ structures and which vessels need the most immediate medical attention.
Hold on. Hold on. Okay. Just hold on.
It's unclear if Dobby or Harry pulled the knife out or if it was a slashing wound, but medically speaking, it's much safer to leave an object in its puncture location than to pull it out to remove it from the body. Pulling out an embedded object would cause Dobby to hemorrhage quickly, which would also cause immediate issues with his blood pressure. To show how quickly things can unravel, let's do a hypothetical calculation. For a normal person, let's say the resting cardiac output is around 4 liters per minute, and total blood volume is 6 liters. Let's quadruple cardiac output to account for the fight and adrenaline response, which would be around 16 liters per minute, which is a tad high but totally not unreasonable. This means that we get a result of 120 beats per minute and 133 milliliters per beat, since we can account for heart rate and stroke volume having increased values due to the exertion and stress. So let's say that 1/8 of each cardiac stroke leaves the wound during each beat, which is roughly 16 milliliters per beat. This means purely by math, you'd have about 3 minutes of blood, right? Not exactly. Now, the body does have some natural preventative measures put in place during an event like this so you don't perish in a matter of minutes. Fluids will generally follow all paths in proportion to their respective resistance, so all of the blood per beat is not going out of the wound all at once. There's something called cardiac tamponade, which is when all of the blood doesn't come directly out of the body. Some collects in something called the pericardial space. When this happens, the pressure in this space increases, reducing bleeding, which causes the blood in the pericardium to clot, helping to close the hole. The compressed ventricles fill with less blood, and therefore eject less blood through the wound. The blood pressure in the chamber falls as the patient loses blood, which then further reduces blood flow. Now, Dobby is still hemodynamically unstable, which means that he still needs medical attention immediately despite all of this, but given their location and the trio's lack of healing spell knowledge, he unfortunately passes away a few minutes post-injury. Despite Dobby's unfortunate end, basic healing spells generally seem to do well, sealing wounds, stopping bleeding, and even mending bones. Witches and wizards are even generally thought to be more robust than normal people, as seemingly serious forms of blunt force trauma to you and I are considered to be mere scratches, as outlined by this quote from Hagrid.
A car crash? A car crash killed Lily and James Potter?
You have to say something.
It's an outrage!
That said, dangers and all, I'm still waiting for my letter to Hogwarts.